Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. We are finishing the book of Vayikra. We're going to say Chazak, Chazak at the end. We always love doing that. And we've spoken in the past what the significance of that is. Just to quickly recap, the idea is that when we finish something, we're saying that in Judaism, we never finish anything. So we finished the book of Vayikra, but Chazak, Chazak, because of everything that we learned through that, we became strong, but Vinis Chazek, we become even stronger to take on more, right? Because the more knowledge you have, the more Torah you have under your belt, the more you could learn, the more questions you have, the more answers you could have, and then your knowledge expands. And it's not like 1+1 is 2, and then it's more like at times it becomes even more and more, because you're able to grasp more knowledge quicker because you have a stronger base. So that's chazak, chazak. We become stronger and stronger. When it's chazak, we become even stronger, right? But if we did the learning, right? If we learned and became stronger with it, we acquired more knowledge, right? So then we could become even stronger and acquire even more knowledge. And that's the idea of chazak, chazak, when it's chazak, and that's both. 1 second. He said he didn't get it from you, but I just sent it to him, so I don't know. But so that's what it means. That's what it means. Chazak, chazak, v'nis chazek. So that's just a quick recap. We expanded on this idea before, but it's important to realize. People say, "Wow, there's so much Torah." Of course, there's so much Torah, and there's still so much more Torah that I need to learn, right? But the more you learn, the more it's easier to start grasping even more knowledge, and to in the beginning, sort of it's stepping stones. It's like a kid learning, the ABCs or the alphabets, right? And then learning how to read, and then once they learn how to read, so then they're able to acquire even more. And then once they get older, and they have more knowledge, so then they're able to acquire even more knowledge and have a broader sense of things. Or if you once you start learning certain topics, right, you're able to put things together and put different topics together. So that's the idea. That's the idea of chazak, chazak. But that's also the idea of just generally, of the more we learn, right, the more knowledge we acquire, and the more knowledge we acquire, the more we have the ability to acquire even more knowledge, right? To get even more knowledge, and that's sort of part of the chizuk, part of the encouragement, for people to say, "Wow, there's so much out there. I can never grasp that." Right? No, no, no. The more you learn, right, the more you have the opportunity, the more you fill yourself up, and the more you can even grasp even more knowledge because now you have a stronger base. Okay, let's move on. That was sort of just a quick tidbit on Chazak Chazak. I want to talk about this year a few topics in Behar Bechukosai. It's a double parsha, page 696 in the Hebrew, 697 in the English, and that's where it starts, and that's where we're going to start. Chapter 25, verse 2. So it says that God spoke to Moshe at Har Sinai, saying, and last year we spoke about why does it have to say Bahar Sinai. We're not going to go into that this year. Hey, Dabra b'nei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people, v'amart aleim, and tell them, Ki sevayo la'aretz, when you come into the land, asher ani nosin lechem, that I give to you, v'shavta aretz Shabbos Hashem, you should give the land a Shabbos, and as we know, that's called the mitzvah of Shemitah, the sabbatical year. Right? Every 7 years, there's a mitzvah of Shemitah, of that the farmer can't do anything to the land, and that's it. The next verse, 6 years, you should plow your field, and the 7th year, you shouldn't do anything to it. Right? You can't do anything to the land, and just let it be. And that's the mitzvah of Shemitah, which we'll talk about a little bit. We spoke about it in the past years. We'll talk about it a little bit, but we'll tie it into the point I want to bring out. The Alshach, right? The Alshach brings out a very famous commentary, brings out something very interesting. The verse says, "Ki shevaya la'aretz," when you come into the land, right? So the simple explanation of that is that the mitzvah Shemitah is only in the land of Eretz Yisrael, which is true. That's the halacha. If someone owns land, a farm, which there are Jews that own farms, right? If someone owns a farm here in what's it called again? someone owns a land in Missouri, Illinois, right, or wherever they own land, there's no mitzvah of Shemitah. There's no mitzvah of Shemitah, right? There's Shemitah is only in the land of Eretz Yisrael. That's why one has to be careful when they're buying produce during the Shemitah year to make sure that the produce is not coming from Eretz Yisrael. Usually, we want to buy produce from Eretz Yisrael, right? We want to support Eretz Yisrael, but on this sabbatical year, right, it's one should not buy produce from Eretz Yisrael because even though you're in Chutz La'aretz, you're out of Eretz Yisrael, right? But if that fruit is not being sold and it was processed, I mean to say that it's not keeping the sabbatical year, you're not allowed to have enjoyment from it even outside of Eretz Yisrael, right? But that's the mitzvah of Shemitah. The mitzvah of Shemitah, right, is only in Eretz Yisrael. So the very simple explanation, Tzivay Large, when you come into the land, I mean, it's telling you where the mitzvah of Shemitah is. The Alshich points out that it could have just said, right, that the V'amarta lehem ba'aretz ba'achuzaschem in your land, right, do the mitzvah of Shemitah. It could have said it in a different way, right? It could have said it a slightly different way. The question is not such a big question. Right? It's more the idea that he wants to bring out. He said we could learn another idea, another lesson, right? The halakha that's learned out of it, of course, is the halakha that learned out of it. Right? There's a hashkafic lesson that we can learn from this that is a extremely important idea that's not only necessarily for Eretz Yisrael, and that is kisavayo la'aretz. When you come into the land, says the Alshich that it's coming to tell you, right, that when you come into the land, that asher ani noshen lechem, right, that I gave to you, right? Why does it have to say asher ani noshen lechem that I gave to you? Because it's just coming to tell me the mitzvah of Shemitah is only in the land. So when you come into the land, shafta haaretz, you should make the sabbatically. What's what ani noshen lechem that I'm giving to you? So it says the Alshich that the Torah is teaching and Hashem is reminding us that every 6 years we have to remind, part of the mitzvah of Shemitah is to remind ourselves that even though I work the land, even though it's my inheritance from my parents, because Eretz Yisrael is through inheritance, or you bought it, right? And you bought the land from someone and it has to go back to you, or whatever. I don't want to get into that right now. But really, Ani noshen lechem, I'm the one that gave you this land. I'm the one that gave you, right, this property, right? Some property land is, I'm an owner, right? I have to pay property tax, right? So, I'm the owner. It's my, finally you feel like a little security, right? Owning land, you feel secure, right? You're renting this and that, and once you become a homeowner, you feel, right? You bought an office, you bought a land to work the field, to make produce, to do whatever it is. You feel ownership. You feel like, ich bin a balabas, right? I'm someone. I'm someone, right? So, Kadosh Baruch Hu, ani noshen lechem, I'm giving to you. Part of the mitzvah of Shemitah is to remind you that no, you are. I'm letting you be on this land. And yes, you inherited, and that's part of how Hashem gives it to us. But at the end of the day, right? I'm telling you, you can't work this land in the 7th year, right? There's other ideas out of it, but one of the ideas is to remind us that Hashem is the one that gave us the land. And this idea, right? This idea is not necessarily only for Eretz Yisrael. It's in general, and it ties into the whole concept of Shemitah, which we're going to talk about in 1 minute, right? It ties into the whole idea of Shemitah that even in Chutz La'aretz, right? We have to remember. I know where Sukkot is about 8 months away, 7-8 months away, right? But really, that's the idea of Sukkot. Also, the holiday of Sukkot, right, is the idea that whatever we have, right, the security that we feel with our home, right, Baruch Hashem, we should, and there's a mitzvah of putting on mezuzah on the house and to make a sudas hodah, to make a chanukah sabais, to when someone buys a new house, right, they make a party and they say certain things, and it is of course it's a mitzvah, to the extent also that it says that when in the laws of going out to war, right, it says if you someone that built a new house. Question is if it's only he built it or if he bought it. Okay, I don't want to get into that, but it says whoever built a new house doesn't go out to war because there's a certain, I just built a new house. I have to take care of my house. It's my house, right? So of course, Hashem wants us to feel ownership over the house, but at the same time, we have to remember with that ownership that it's all a gift from Hashem. Hashem is the one that allows it to happen. And Hashem is the one that allows us to have the house that we have, allows us to have the land that we have, be it in Eretz Yisrael, wherever it is. So that's what the Torah said, emphasizes, that I'm giving to you, says the Al-Shach. It emphasizes on that to remind us that this is part of the lessons of Shemitah, which really ties in to the whole idea of Shemitah. Right? The whole idea of Shemitah is a general reminder, right? That, something, okay, why not other businesses? Because there's many ideas to Shemitah, of course, but especially back then, the majority of the main industry was agriculture, right? And of course, there's other industries also, but it's sort of the main industry, and it's not only the industry of agriculture; it also affects everybody, right? What are we going to eat? Store owners, people eat their fruits and vegetables, right? So it's a reminder that Hashem is the one that runs the world, right? That no. Every seventh year, the farmers, they made a kolel, right? They had a special Shemitah kolel, right? The farmers would go and have the Talmud speaks about this, they had special classes, and they had special things, because Hashem wanted the land to rest, but not only that, but for us to rest. So we have it on a weekly basis. That's called Shabbos, right? And Shabbos is also a covenant that Hashem created the world. Part of that is also by believing that Hashem created the world, and Hashem is constantly watching over us, right? And helping us out. If there could be some $1 billion deal that only on Shabbos, but trust me, you're better off keeping Shabbos, because Hashem is the one that's going to decide if the deal is going to go through, or if it will be good for you or won't be good for you, right? And then every seventh year, on a much larger scale, the whole year, right? We have to stop sort of working the land, and to remind us that Hashem is the one that runs the world. And this is a fundamental emunah, belief system that really transcends into every part of our day-to-day life. It sort of really impacts, that's a better word, it really impacts every aspect of our day-to-day life. Because when we believe this, and the stronger we believe it, the more it affects how we give our tzedakah, more affects how we spend our time, and more affects where we go and what we do and what we eat. Because the more we believe that Hashem is the one that really runs the world, and Hashem is the one that really is in charge of us and allows us to breathe, and allows us to earn money, and allows us to live in our homes, and allows us onwards and onwards. So then everything we do, we want to do to serve Hashem, because He's the one that's allowing it. So, of course, if He's the one that's allowing all this, so we don't want to get on His bad side, right? Sort of kind of thing, right? But but that's Yira, right? There's a vote of Meira, so not getting on Hashem's bad side, and then Me'ava on a deeper level, not only because we don't want to get on His bad side, but we want to connect to Hashem because we love Hashem, and we realize that ultimately He's the one that created us and knows best for us. And that's really on a deeper level what the idea of Shemitah is, right? A year worth of a Shabbos, of emunah, of faith that really impacts our day-to-day life and our viewpoint in life. Right? That really impacts every part of our decisions of what we do and how we don't and how we do. Because if you believe that Hashem runs the world and all your finances are governed by Hashem, so you won't have any question of giving your 10%, right? Or more, right? If you believe in that, so then you say, okay, so of course I want to try work on keeping Shabbos, and of course it's a muscle, it's an exercise, it's not all or nothing. It's building it and growing it, right? But of course we want to build that up and try to work on it, and try to work on kosher, and try whatever it is we're trying to work on, right? The more we build that emunah with that Hashem really runs the world, the easier it will be to do that. And that's part of the idea of Shemitah, and that's part of the idea of what it says the Al-Shach, Ani nosen lechem, that I'm giving it to you to remind this idea. So that's one idea that I wanted to talk about today. The next thing I want to talk about today is in the same chapter, verse. Let me get to it. 1 second. Yeah, jump to page 706. We're going to jump through Behar. All right. We spoke about some of the things last year, and hopefully we'll speak about some of them next year. All right, but we're going to jump to the end. Right. And it speaks about the mitzvah of it speaks about the idea of someone is a slave, right? If someone is a slave to a Jewish person, right? So he had to sell himself as a slave. It's called an Eved Ivri, a Jewish slave, right? So the halacha is that he works for 6 years and then he goes out on the seventh, right? But if he wants, he could stay. If he doesn't want to leave, so then something called where he gets his ear drilled and he could stay, but he has to leave by Yovel. Right? By Yovel, Yovel is 7 times 7, 49 years, and then the 50th year is Yovel. Right? There's 7 years of Shemitah. Right? 7 cycles of Shemitah, sorry, which is 49 years, and the 50th year is Yovel, right? And then that's when he has to leave. So it doesn't make a difference if he was a slave for 2 years and then Yovel comes up, or if he was a slave for 49 years and then Yovel comes up, right? It really doesn't, it's, if he decides to stay more than his 6 years, right, with the whole way of how he's able to do it, so then by Yovel he has to for sure go. And that's what the verse says, right? First, verse 54, it says, if he doesn't go out with these other things of the 6 years or other ways of going out, right? So then he has to go out by Yovel. Why? So verse 54 says, Kili b'nei Yisrael avadim. Avadayhem asher tzis yisam ha'tzam and yasam ha'kechem. Because to me, says Hashem, b'nei Yisrael avadim, the Jewish people are my slaves, right? Sort of say, avadim over here doesn't mean to say slaves, but workers, right? Our Eved Hashem is a servant, right? A servant. They're my servants, right? They're my servants, right? And no one else's servant, and I'm the one that took them out of Mitzrayim, and Yashem Nechechem, I'm Hashem, your God. And the idea of this is that the commentaries explain that we have to remind ourselves, right? And that's what the Torah is telling us, that sometimes we get lost, right? Sometimes we get lost in sort of our what our purpose in our lives are. Sometimes we get lost in what we really here for, right? And think we're not we're not servants to someone else, but sometimes we are. We're servants to our work, right? We're servants to our culture. We're servants to our home, right? To whatever it is, right? We're sort of not necessarily a servant in the sense of what we're thinking about, like a slave kind of servant, but we get caught up, and Hashem is saying, no, you need the money, you need this, you need that, so then you could be an Eved Ivri. But at the end of the day, right, by Yovel, right, after 7 years of Shemitah, right, and why Yovel and what's the idea of Yovel, we'll talk about for a few minutes in a minute, right, but then you have to go out. There's no way of staying longer, because Avadayim, you are my servants, right? You're my servants. I'm the one that took you out of Mitzrayim, and a person has to realize that ultimately you're my servant, and you're no one else's servant. And I think that's a tremendous lesson for us to reflect on, say, how is this applicable to us? It's so applicable to us because we lose sight of what's really our purpose in this world. We truly lose sight, and I'm talking to myself as well, we lose sight of what our purpose in this world is. We get caught up with this and that and business and culture and so many other things, right? And we lose sight of it. And Hashem is telling us we have to remember that we have to be an Eved Hashem. The ultimate thing is to be an Eved Hashem, to be a servant of Hashem, right? David HaMelech said, and we say this in Hallel, right? Ani Avdecha, I am your servant, right? I am your servant, right? That's how David HaMelech. That's what King David said. We say this on in the Hallel. Ani Avdecha ben Amasecha, I am your servant, right? The son of your maidservant, right? Because that's what that was sort of the prayer. That was David HaMelech saying, we have to remember that, right? That our whole existence is only to serve Hashem, right? And of course, we need to work and we need this, but all that has to be to serve Hashem. Avadai ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim. B'nei Yisrael are my servants, right? And no one else's servant. I allow for there to have parnasa and to this, to work and to this and that. But every 50 years, right, every 7 cycles of the Shemitah, of 7 cycles, and every 50 years, you have to step back from that and remind yourself. And even if you want to stay in you have to, if you want to start again, you can start again, right? But you have to sort of stop. And what's the idea of 50? What's Yovel, right? So, I mean, we know there's 47 times 7 is 49, right? There's 49 days of the Sphira to go to Shavuos, right? There's many ideas of sort of a recap, right? Sort of a recap of 7, right? 7 is the 7 days of the week. 6 days you shall work, and the 7th day is Shabbos. 6 years you shall work. The 7th year is Shemitah, and then on a larger scale is 6. It's 7 times 7. It's 7 years of sabbatical year of sort of. And then there's sort of that next year, the 50th, right, which we sort of remind ourselves that we're sort of starting a new complete cycle, and that's Yovel, right? And according to a lot of opinions, right, Yovel has the same laws of Shemitah, right? So for 2 years in a row, you can work the field, and it's sort of a platform of this higher level of reconnecting with Hashem, right? After 7 years, every 7 cycles. And there's, of course, more to talk about that, but that's not our topic today. Right? But the point I want to bring out, and the lesson that we're learning over here is, and it's so crucial and important, we sometimes we don't talk about this. There's so many beautiful ideas that we talk about, and we talk about this, and we talk about that, and those are so important to talk about. But sometimes we forget about some of the fundamentals that are the engine of all those things. And this is the engine of all those things. What we're talking about this week, right, is realizing that we are an Eved Hashem. We are the servants of Hashem, and by reminding ourselves that, and by sort of living our lives in that direction and with that North Star, right? So then we're here to serve Hashem, right? So our work has to be what Hashem tells us, and Hashem tells us what to do. We have a Baruch Hashem, thank God. We have a Torah, right? We have a written Torah, we have an oral Torah, and we know what Hashem wants us to do, right? So by how do we make our master pleased with us, and is by doing what he wants us to do, and that changes our whole mindset, right? Our purpose in life is not to make $1 million. Okay, so if you make $1 million, so then we utilize $1 million to help us do our purpose in life, and we give $100,000 to tzedakah because that's 10%, right? If we have a good voice, right? So that's not our purpose in life, but then we're able to use that to inspire people. If you're able to daven for the Amid, right, or at a kumzitz, right, or whatever it is, right, utilize that to serve Hashem. That's not my purpose in life. My purpose in life is not a good voice. My purpose in life is to utilize what I have, right, and to serve Hashem. That's my purpose in life. And again, I think this is so crucial, and this all ties into what we started off with Shemitah and the idea of that I'm the one that gave you Eretz Yisrael. This sort of all is tying in to the same idea, and just to sort of put the icing on the cake or the cherry on top or whatever phrase you like to use, right? I like all of them, right? But the next verse, right, is so beautiful. The next verse says like this, chapter 26. Lo sa'asu lachem Elilim, ufeso matzev lo yisakum lachem ve'em mashchis lo titnu ba'artzachem stak v'dalakin yeshem lachem. So the next verse, it seems sort of not connected at all. Next verse says, do not make for yourself idols, right? And a idol of stone, or of rocks, right? Do not place them in your land, because I'm Hashem Elokeichem. I'm Hashem your God, right? So the commentators want to know, like, what's the connection? Okay, of course, with many places it tells us about Avodah Zarah, but what's the connection to Yovel, to Shemitah, to an Eved, right? what's the connection? Why is it right here, right? What's the connection? So Rashi says something very interesting. Rashi doesn't ask this question, right? But based off what Rashi says, we could give an answer. Rashi says, right? Do not make a god. So Rashi is sort of answering this question a little bit, right? But we're going to expand on it. Rashi said this is talking about someone that, God forbid, is sold to a non-Jew, right? So till now we're speaking about someone that's sold to a Jew. There's someone, God forbid, is sold to a non-Jew, right? Unfortunately, it happened many times, right? Got captured on the road or whatever it is, right? Of course, it's a mitzvah to try to redeem him, right, as much as we can. But if someone got sold to a non-Jew as a slave, right? So lo yomer, you shouldn't say Hova Rabbi Megala Arayas Afani Kamayu. Just because my master, right, is immoral, right, is immoral, so I could be immoral. Just because my master serves idol worshiping, so then I should serve idol worshiping because I have to do what my master does, right? Says just because my master doesn't keep the Shabbos, so therefore I could keep the Shabbos. Kamosha, I should do like him. Therefore, the verse says, right? It says that's why it says do not do this, and it says it by the commandment of Shemitah and the commandment of Yovel, like we said before, Avadei, how you are my servants, and that's what it ends off, right? I am Hashem your God, right? You're my servant. You have to be in this world sold, unfortunately, to a non-Jewish person, right? But you're my servant, just like you're my servant, right? Sold to a Jewish person, there by Yovel, you have to go out automatically. Right. So too, if God forbid you're sold to a non-Jew, right, don't start saying, well, my master does this. I have to do it. If my master told me to do it, I have to do it. Right. And so therefore, no, that's why it says it in this parsha, right, to tell us that no, that's not an excuse, because ultimately you're avada, you're my servants, right? Your predicament right now is in the materialistic world that you are a servant of a non-Jew. So then you have to realize if it's something that you're not allowed to do, like things you have to speak to them, and if they're going to kill you, so then that's something else, and that goes into the laws of what you have to put your life on the line for or not, right? But no, don't try to say the philosophical reason is because since my master told me to do it, I have to do it. That's not a reason. So I was thinking, how is this practical to our daily lives? And it's so practical to our daily lives, because this is something that we so many times say to ourselves in so many different ways, right? Or many different wording, right? But we say when we speak it out in this way, it's like never us. What chassidus? We would never say that, right? Of course, we know we're servants of Hashem. So that we would never say just because my master, does adultery, I'll do adultery, or just because my master, kills someone, I'll kill someone. Of course, we won't say that, right? Or just because my master serves avodah zarah, we would serve it. Of course, we won't say that, right? But the Torah always brings out the extreme points. But we, in certain ways, we do say this, not to that extreme, but we do say it. We say it, keeping my boss wants me to work on Shabbos, and my boss needs me to go to a business meeting, and there's non-kosher food, and it'll look weird if I don't eat there, and he wants me to eat there. Oh, so just my boss is eating, so I could eat it, right? Or the culture that we live in is telling me to do X, Y, and Z, so therefore I have to do that, right? No. Remember, we're servants of Hashem. We do what Hashem wants us to do. We have the wherewithal and the strength inside of us to stand up to the culture, to stand up what society tells us, or our boss tells us, or sometimes even family members pressure us to do certain things, right? No, we are servants of Hashem, and we can't say just because my boss tells me, or sometimes even my spouse tells me, or someone else, or culture, or friends are telling me to do this, and then therefore I have to do this. Whatever it may be, from speaking lashon hara to cheating in our taxes to where everyone's holding on their Shabbos level of taking that next step of keeping Shabbos, eating more kosher, right, giving more tzedakah, whatever it is, wherever we're holding, we're not necessarily saying that we're talking about, avodah zarah and killing and those extreme mitzvahs. Of course, the Torah tells us the extreme because to bring this out and to say for us to recognize that. But on the things that we're struggling with, on the things that we're dealing with on a daily basis, right? And we say, well, look, society tells me, or my boss or my whatever friend, I have pressure from here, whatever it is, right? We are servants of Hashem first, and this is directly learned out from this idea over here, sort of connected to what we're speaking about. That's what the Torah is telling us. We are servants of Hashem, right? And the more we imprint that inside ourselves, the more we recognize that, the more we start, uh, changing our viewpoint on things. I think I've said this story before, and actually, my Miri just used a story this past week, and she spoke at the Shabbaton in Chesterfield, right? And she used a story also, and I'm sure I've said the story before. But my grandfather, of blessed memory, my father's father, was born in Cleveland, Ohio, in 1908. Right, born in Cleveland, Ohio, in 1908, and there was no Torah prep or Epstein or Kadima or Block or nothing. There was no day schools at all, right? There was nothing. His father was Shomer Shabbat, right? Which was, again, something a little unheard of in the early 1900s, especially in Cleveland, not like New York or other big cities, but in Cleveland, he was Shomer Shabbat. He wasn't very educated himself, but he knew from what his parents knew, and he went to synagogue, and he helped start a lot of things in Cleveland. Which that's not the topic right now, right? But my grandfather had my great grandfather hired like a rebbe to come to the house after public school to teach his kids, and so that was a level of education that my grandfather had. But when his first year going to his first after the first semester in college, university, whatever it was, right? And back then the exams were on Shabbos, right? Shabbos was just another day of the week. It wasn't like a Saturday, it was and like any other day of the week. And the exam was on Shabbos, and he had a upbringing that Shabbos is still Shabbos. He might not have been very learned, but he still knew what Shabbos was, and he kept Shabbos. So he went to some of his friends, that were sort of in school with him or the year before, and they said, "Hey, like, what do you guys do?" He said, "Oh, if I get we're in America, just chill, whatever. It's we're in America, It's in the Yiddish they used to say the Nair Medina, the new country, right? The new country, right?" He said, "What's the Shabbos?" He said, "Okay, so use your left hand if you want. Use your less dominant. There's a leniency that if you need to do something, you could use it, but." That's only a leniency if you really have to do it, and whatever. I don't want to get into that, right? But so there was this whole pressure on him not to make don't make trouble. Just don't make us trouble. Mm-hmm. And he didn't. He made trouble, right? He's a good faggy man. He made trouble, right? He I don't know. I think he wrote to the senator and to the governor. Right? First, of course, he spoke to the head of the head of the university, and he got the exam changed from Shabbos to a different day of the week. Right? He got the exam changed from Shabbos to a different day of the week. That is reminding ourselves, who are we? Whose servants are we? We're a servant of Hashem. Our actions speak louder than words. We have to, of course, acquire more knowledge, and that's what we start off with. The more knowledge we acquire, the more we know what we have to do, and the more we could acquire even more knowledge, and it helps us. But at the end of the day, when we strengthen our emunah, our faith, that we are servants of Hashem, right? Be it through what we spoke about now, be it through Shemitah, right? Be it through, as Moshe, I think Moshe Feinstein says, that every mitzvah has an action, right? Almost every mitzvah has. With Judaism, we're religion of action. We shake the lulav and we eat the matzah, and we have to build a fence on our roof. We have to blow the shofar. We're eating food and making a blessing, right? We're a religion of action. See, so where's the action of emunah, faith, right? Faith where's the action to that? So I think it's Moshe Feinstein or someone else said that when we give tzedakah, right? When we give our 10%, that's the action of our faith, right? That's showing that we believe that Hashem is the one that gave me all the whatever I have, whatever I inherited, whatever I worked on, whatever money I have, whatever properties I have, it's all from Hashem. And He asked me to give at least 10%, so I'm going to give at least 10%. That's my action of emunah, of faith, right? So when we do our actions of standing up for Shabbos, our actions, standing up not to speak lashon hara, right? To make sure that we give our tzedakah, to make sure that we work on eating more kosher, whatever it is, right? Whatever there's so many things that we could work on. Our davening, our whatever it is, learning Hebrew if that's our next step, right? Whatever it is that we're working on, right? Those actions speak louder than words by showing that we remind ourselves we're an Eved Hashem, the worst servant of Hashem. We're not going to allow allow the society. We're not going to allow our the college. We're not going to allow our friends. We're not going to allow our boss. We're not going to allow our whatever it is, friends, family, sometimes also to deter us from doing what Hashem wants us to do. And we'll say, well, if they do it, so then if my boss tells me to do it, so then I should do it. If my this do it, so then I should do it. No. We do what Hashem wants us to do, and our actions speak louder than words. And there's so many. Every generation, we have our challenges, we have our things, right? And every person has their challenges and things, and that's the ultimate way of us growing. Right, and then Mirz Hashem, when we do that, then we start becoming an Eved Hashem, becoming a servant of Hashem, right? We could just start off with Bechukosai, the next part of Bechukosai. This year we're more homed in on Behar, right? But Bechukosai starts off with V'im Bechukosai Telechu Mitzvosai Tishmor V'Asis Masam. If you would, right? When or if, right? If when you go with my chukim is commandments that a chok is a commandment that God did not reveal the reason to us. Tilechu, you go with this mitzvah tishmaru, and my mitzvos, right? The mitzvahs are the commandments that God revealed the reason to tishmaru. You will keep them, you will heat them, right? Vasisim asum, and you do it, right? So just along the same line, sort of going from one parsha to another parsha, this verse is really the epitome of how we live our lives. We have to Telechu, our travel, our day-to-day activities should be with, even if we don't necessarily yet know why we do everything that we do, right? It could be the reasons were revealed, right? But Bechukosai, my commandments that going in the words of Hashem, following what our rabbis tell us, right? And there's certain mitzvahs that God just didn't reveal to us, and there's certain that He revealed to us, but we're not holding there yet. We haven't learned that yet, right? But we still have Telechu. That's our travel. That's our way. It doesn't say Bechukosai. It should just say Bechukosai mitzvah. You have to keep everything. No. We have to travel. Our day-to-day activities and have to be telechus, should be going, and the journey should be a journey of believing that whatever Hashem tells us is for the best, because we are servants. A servant doesn't question his master, right? It's not a problem of trying to understand, right? Of course, and the questions that we are asked to try to understand and to better appreciate and to grow, of course, we have to ask as many questions as we can, but we don't question our master of what he tells us to do. Right? So telechu, we should travel, our journey should always be with, like a chok, understanding that whatever Hashem wants from us is for the best. We might not yet understand it. So why do we have to keep Shabbat? Why do we have to this? And why 2 days Yom Tov? And why this? And why do we have to eat only kosher? And why do we have to have mezuzah in every door in the house? And why this? We could ask a lot of questions, and there's answers to all of them, right? Some of them Hashem did not reveal to us, but just because we don't understand them doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't do it. Because Eved, a servant, does what his master tells him to do. So Telechu, we should travel, right? And then of course, all the mitzvahs we have to keep, and we have to heat, and we have to care about them. Right? Something that's important to you, you watch over it. You make sure that you don't lose an opportunity for it. Make sure that you look out for opportunities. And so to shmaru, you should heat it. You should watch it. It should be something that's precious to you. The mitzvahs should be precious to you, and so on. And also don't forget to do it, because sometimes we can have a lot of good thoughts and we want to do X, Y, and Z, and we want to do this, and we want to do that, and we want to help here, and we have a lot of good thoughts, and that's great, and that's the first stepping stone, right? But sometimes we just don't do it, right? As Pirkei Avos says, Omer ma'at v'aseh harbeh. Say little, but do a lot, right? We have to, telechu, right? You have to do them, right? And this verse is sort of the epitome of how we have to live our lives. And then it says the blessings and the curses and the rest of Parsha Behar, which we're not going to go into this year, right? But that's how we're gonna end this class today, right? By this verse, and sort of we led up to this verse through the different things that we spoke about. Number one, we start off with, why does it say that I gave you this land, right? And the Shemitah is in Eretz Yisrael, as we spoke about it. I gave you this land; it's my land, right? And you have to remember that it's yes, you're supposed to have ownership and feel good about it, and even have a Chanukah Sabayis, right? But it's my land. Remember that. that, right? And then that led into the idea of Shemitah, right? To remind us, constantly remind us that everything's from Hashem, right? And then we spoke about what does it mean to be to Yovel? Why does he have to go out on the 50th year a servant? Because Avadaihem, they're my servant. Those lead into, when we do that and we work on that, it leads into strengthening our ability to remind ourselves on a daily basis and to live a life of we are servants of Hashem. And then we spoke about that. Yes, if we shouldn't think that because we're servants of a non-Jew, be it if we're truly a servant, God forbid, or culture or a boss or whatever it is, right? We can't fall to that pressure, right? And we have to do what Hashem wants us to do. At the end of the day, we're servants of Hashem, and we're not servants to the Avodah Zarah or to the non-Jew or to the work or to the business or to the society. Right? And we said the story with my father, and that's sort of all it leads up to when we have those ideas and we build those ideas, and then we're able to live our lives with this verse of we live our lives that our travels in life is that we remember that we're servants of Hashem, and even if we don't understand it, we do what Hashem wants. So that's a chok. Right? A chok is a mitzvah that God did not reveal to us, but there are certain things that even Hashem did reveal. We don't know yet what they are, or sometimes things happen to us, right? We don't know what they are. We're servants of Hashem, and we believe Gamzu Tov, this too is for the best. Everything that Hashem does for us is for the best. Tilechu, that our travel, right, should be, and that mitzvah to Tismaru, our mitzvahs, we should cherish. We should watch. We should look out for opportunities to do mitzvahs. We should make sure that we don't lose opportunities to mitzvahs. Something that we care about, something that we cherish, we watch it. We're constantly a shomer. We're constantly watching over it, and that's how we should live our lives with the mitzvahs. But vasisim also, we have to make sure that we do them. It's not just we don't meditate on a mountain, right? We don't just talk about things, but we're a religion of action. We have to do it, because when we do the action, that is the greatest way to show that this is something that we truly believe in, and it changes who we are. And that's the greatest way to show that we're truly an Eved Hashem, we're a servant of Hashem. And Mirz Hashem, when we live our lives like that, that's the epitome of living our lives. Mirz Hashem, when we live our lives this way, hopefully our master, right, will end these wars and bring the geula, bring the redemption speedily in our days. We'll all be able to live in Eretz Yisrael and truly appreciate and understand the greatness of our opportunity to be an Eved Hashem, a servant of Hashem. Thank you all for joining us this evening.